Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From the District with State Senator Suzanne Weber. Suzanne, how are you?
Well, I'm fine. I'm a little disappointed in the weather.
I know.
I'm at Robin's house this weekend because when we got up this morning, everything was white here in Albany. And so I just decided to stay here because it's not going to be that long until I have to head back to Salem for our last week.
Yes, and it is. These short sessions. You've only had to do this once, right? I think you've gone home pretty much every weekend.
Yes.
So this is the one time that you haven't been able to dodge the weather.
And the thing was too is that we did have a session on Friday.
Right.
And we had some important bills that we had to discuss. And so we were in the building on the floor until maybe 5:30 in the afternoon. And so it got pretty intense because we had about 3 hours of testimony on the one really important bill that we've been looking forward to all this session, the 4002.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that and one other bill today that really have encompassed the entirety of this session. The session has really been about drugs and houses.
Yes.
It's been about dealing with the overdose epidemic that has been going on for far too long in Oregon, and also actually trying to put a dent in the housing issue around production. There's been a lot of talk about for years now about things around housing, talking about housing, how we need to put money to housing, and that's all fine and good, but you actually passed a bill that might actually do something to build houses, encourage building
Yes.
houses. That'll be the other bill that we talked to. But before we start into all the fun, Senator, how are you doing? Anything fun this last week?
Anything fun?
Any great constituent meetings? It's hard during these last.
No, but you know what? We did have a get together of senators, representatives, Republicans, and Democrats in a very casual setting to eat David Brock Smith's wonderful Mexican food. He makes a guacamole like he just is to die for.
Did you do karaoke? Because he's the master of karaoke.
Oh, I know. They had their karaoke night too, which was phenomenal because once again, it was a bipartisan.
Him and Senator Coleman are the songbirds of the Senate, I believe, is what they call them.
Yes, they are. And I guess they had 8 or 10 of them there that were just warbling away. So, I need just like a
Martin.
Robin's home.
Oh.
And Martin is, of course, got to have his moment.
Yes, of course.
But anyway, that was a really good experience because we got to just sit with our people from both sides of the fence and just have conversation about what are you doing and
it's good to remember. What book are you reading? It's good to remember that everybody's human. These folks on the other side of the aisle are human. When I worked in the building, I was a fan of the Craft Brewers Caucus, and I think that still happens.
It is still happening.
But it not just for members, but for staff, and
yes,
we would go around to different breweries in the area and just chat, and it was really, really enjoyable. These were when things were a little less. Well, last year, let's say things took a little break from the frivolity because everybody hated each other.
And I have to say too that we finished all of our committee meetings, and on our last education committee, then we had a good discussion about we have a lot of kids that are missing school. And why is this happening? And what are we going to do? I mean, we in Oregon have it's a 38% absentee rate in our schools. That equates to 4,000 kids in our schools that are not attending on a regular basis.
Hmm.
And so we have a big problem. And so in the long session, I had agreed to work on it in a task force. And so we are gearing up to work on that. Because if you're not in school, you're not learning.
Right.
That's it.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about these two bills. We're going to start with House Bill 4002, which was probably the bill that got the most attention this session.
Yes.
When we started, there were two bills. There was the Republican idea and there was the Democrat idea.
Right.
And it seems like perhaps that some actual negotiations, some actual give and take happened on this bill, because it seemed to land kind of right in the middle.
I think that there was a lot of give and take. There were a lot of meetings, and all of the information wasn't out there in the public all the time. So there were good opportunities for people to be able to actually look at the data of what was happening and to make some really good decisions about going forward and changes that we could make. And we also relied heavily on our law enforcement, our sheriffs, and our DAs to weigh in on this, because they are going to be impacted by this for sure. But I think that we have come to the real realization that we had a failed experiment, and we have got to turn the ship around, and we have got to take care of the people that need the help. We had a report this week about the number of drugs that have come into Washington County just in the month of January. Something like over 1,400,000 doses of various drugs, like, cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, meth, anything. That's how much they seized. And so this is just one part of it.
That we don't.
Because we are basically lawless as far as drugs are concerned.
Right.
Now, the vote came in on the Senate side with 8 that were against it, and the rest of the Senate was in favor of it, and 1 person was excused. But the 1 person who was excused got up and spoke about why, if she could have been there, she would have voted for it.
Right.
But we have to remember that we were in the middle of an experiment that was failing, and people were dying, and we have come up with this possible solution, or a possible partial solution, and we have time to look at it before we make any other changes to it.
Right.
And one of the things we did when 110 was voted in was we didn't plan like Portugal did. Portugal spent up to 6 years planning some things before they did it. We went to look at Portugal, but I was not one of those people. But anyway, what we found was that they were prepared for what they were going to do. And we were a true experiment. We were paid by somebody on the East Coast, and we were put into action without any of the basis that we need to be able to provide, especially the help for addiction.
Right. And looking at the names of the people who voted no on this bill, this is truly bipartisan. There were people on both sides of the aisle who were for it, people on both sides of the aisle who were against it. I think the people who were against it were against it for 2 different reasons. I think you've got people like, I would guess, Senator Lithicum, who probably, and you were there, I was not, probably opposed it because it didn't feel it was strong enough.
Exactly.
And there were people on the other side of the aisle who probably believe that they do not want to recriminalize drugs at all. They believe that it is a health problem, and it should be dealt with in a health capacity. The problem is we tried that and it
Yes,
failed.
it failed.
Really, really, really bad. It failed. So just a little bit of the differences between the two. The Democrats put forward the original 4,002, which would have made this a Class C
Misdemeanor.
which essentially would have been the lowest type of misdemeanor. You could have gone to jail for up to a month.
Not much difference between what we have and
Right.
that option.
The Republicans' bill wanted it to be a Class A misdemeanor, which would have made it so you could go to jail for up to a year. That didn't seem like it was going to be a starting pace. It was going to be a no-go from the folks on the left. What you guys landed on was actually creating a new type of misdemeanor, which allows for incarceration up to 6 months. So split the baby down the middle.
Right.
And also allows for someone to essentially kind of, I think I mentioned this when we were first starting, give somebody an opportunity to kind of go through a diversion process, kind of the same sort of style that you have.
Right.
DUI.
But if you decide that you don't want to go through that diversion, then you can go to jail.
Right. Right. And there was originally part of this, the original 4,002 that made a mandatory diversion. And that got stripped away.
Right.
So that you could do this sort of diversion where you go to get the treatment that you need, just like you would not just like, but much like you would with a DUI. But if you don't do that, like you said, you go to the Hooskow and you're gonna be there for probably 6 months, and that's first one. Beyond that, it gets a lot more complicated.
Well, then there is what they call the deflection, and the counties will opt into that if they wish to. And there's a chart, and I'm sorry I didn't bring it home. That is a flow chart that has been created, and I can make sure that is on my next newsletter, so you can see the whole process, that all of the steps that you would go through.
Right.
And I know that when compared side by side with the repeal 110 effort, we have far more power in what the 4002 is doing to be able to get people into rehabilitation, and to also monitor the availability of the drugs. And another thing we have to remember is that it's the drug dealers too who have been impacting Oregon. We have a constant flow of drugs coming up I-5. We have other nationalities that are very skilled in banking and money laundering that are very active in our state. We have a lot of things that we're going to have to take care of.
Well, this has passed the House. It has passed the Senate. You did vote yes. I think one thing it has not done yet, at least as we sit here at 2:24 on Saturday the 2nd, the governor has not yet signed it.
Right.
Now, I don't believe it's actually, I don't know that the Senate president has even signed it yet. There's a process that you go through.
Yeah, there is.
So
And
it
I'm
probably
not
hasn't gotten to
about
her
that move.
desk yet. But she has, from all I have read, she has signaled that she supports the bill. So she will probably sign it.
And I believe that the 1st of September is a pivotal date on this bill as to going forward. And so I am sure that it will be signed and put, out there long before that.
I suspect. And while I certainly think there probably are some folks from the majority party who genuinely are sick of Measure 110, do not like it, and are glad that this fix is happening, I think there is probably a reality that, particularly in leadership, they have faced the very strong possibility that if you did not do something like this, that a repeal ballot measure would be coming. And I do
Oh,
not
yes.
think they want that.
We have had a group of people that have been working fervently to, if the legislature didn't, make an impact on what was happening with Measure 110, that there would be a ballot,
Right.
an initiative that would go forward, and it would be completely repealed.
Right.
The
So
thing is, Adam, people didn't realize what was going to happen to their next door neighbor and their friends kids. They didn't realize the impact of it. And we have had senators that have stood up in committee and say things like, well, marijuana is not habit forming. It is not addictive. So why would you want to even address this? Well, the marijuana that person was maybe experimenting with in their youth is a far cry from the marijuana that we have today.
right.
And what it's mixed with, and the impact on young people's brains, especially.
I hope that this little disaster of an experiment will give Oregonians an opportunity to pause. When you are considering signing a petition to put something on the ballot,
Yes.
or when you're considering voting for one of these things on the ballot, when there's a process for making a law through the legislature, whether you like it or you lump it, it's got to actually go through a process.
Right.
It has to be vetted in some way, shape, or form. That's just not the case with these ballot measures. And there is, across the country, really, a penchant right now for that some activist organizations are pushing ballot measures as a way to get around legislatures.
Yes.
And I don't think that's a good thing, because you get things like Measure 110.
The unintended consequences. And here's the other thing is, when they stop you out in front of the grocery store and ask you to sign this, do you have the time to really ponder whether or not you should sign something like this? No,
Right.
because they're shoving it at you, and you have to know that they're also paid. They don't care what the outcome is. They're paid to get that signature.
Right. So I have people say, because I've been involved in fighting some of these, just go ahead and sign it, and then the people will vote.
Yeah, right.
Well, but then the people are going to get lied to a bunch, and they're going to have $20 million of advertising shoved down their throats. And there's not going to be an actual vetting of the policy, because while there is millions of dollars of attack ads going across at each other, that's not an actual vetting of policy.
No, it's
that's
not.
just a campaign. And so,
and we've seen that over and over and over again.
right.
We think it is something that is a wonderful right that we have been given. Well, it is a wonderful right that we have been given, but it also comes with a lot of responsibility associated with it.
And it's unfortunate that right has been hijacked by activists, quite honestly, who have very, very deep pockets. A lot of that money coming from the East Coast, other parts of the country, beyond. And they're just dumping a ton of money to buy signatures.
Yes.
And they don't have to live with the consequences.
Right. They don't.
People dying in the street like Oregonians have to.
Yes.
So that's where we're at. It looks like Measure 110 is coming to a merciful end very soon, pending the governor's signature. So that is House Bill 4002. So that's the drugs part. So let's talk about housing.
Yes.
And actually talking again about the issue of referendum.
We are.
House Bill 4026 is part of a package of the governor's, which
Housing.
which is about housing. And
it's her goal to build 36,000 houses a year. And it's something we have so many planning laws and requirements as far as what, how we're going to accomplish this, that it all takes a long, long time to jump through all of the hoops
Right.
to be able to even to have the land and then the permits and then all of the things like infrastructure that needs to be associated with it and the permits that go with that, and it goes on and on and on. So the process of being able to build something is lengthy. It doesn't make any difference which county you're in.
Right. So 4026 does one particular thing that that some people have had some questions about, and what it would essentially do is make it so that there cannot be a referendum, as we were just talking about,
Right.
at the end of a process that would essentially cancel the process out. For example, the expanding of the urban growth boundary. So less of an issue in most of your rural constituents, but you do
Right.
represent portions of Washington and Multnomah County where it very much is an issue. That in order to build housing or build period, it can only be done in the urban growth boundary. And you
Right.
get to a point where that urban growth boundary has essentially become as functionally as dense as it can. And so that you then go through the process of
Right.
expanding that urban growth boundary, which
Yes.
causes a big long process where there's a lot of input.
Didn't McMinnville's expansion of its urban growth boundary several years ago now take at least 10 years to accomplish?
Probably. I mean,
I
not
believe
that
it was one of the longest in the state
right,
to be able to accomplish, and that's not unusual.
right. And where we've seen some of these places is some cities then voting to expand their urban growth boundary, going
Right.
through a very long process, and then some people upset with that because they don't want further development in their communities, which I understand.
Right.
Then coming in
Some
and
people feel that we need to take extraordinary measures to guarantee that farmland will always be there. And farmland is, it is an economic driver, especially in the Willamette Valley. We have a kind of soil that grows things better than anywhere else, and that needs to be protected. And a lot of that is protected by Metro around these areas too. But there are areas that are eliminated from the Metro grid work, whatever you call it, that can be used for that, and Metro doesn't have as much power over it. But just leave it to say, we have to protect farmland. That is extremely important.
well, and I think it's important that this bill doesn't say you should or shouldn't protect farmland. It doesn't
Right.
say that the UGB
It
should
doesn't.
or should not be expanded. What
It
it
doesn't.
does say is that once the process has been gone through, this can be a very, very long, as you said, that 10 years. It could cost millions of dollars to deal with appeals and the like. It is very long and very expensive. And to have someone then come in and file a ballot measure and just collect 5,000 signatures and blow the whole thing up at the very end, it makes it impossible for a city to plan. It makes it very unreliable for builders.
This
To
this
be involved.
always this makes the case for pay attention.
Right.
We have to pay attention to what's going on in our cities, what's going on in our state, what's going on in our neighborhood. We have to pay attention.
Right.
And we can't stand on the sidelines and let things happen. But there is a process and there is a timeline, and the law is very specific about that, and we need to honor that.
Right. So that's what 4026 is designed to do, is to make sure that that process is honored and respected, but that somebody can't throw a bomb at the end
Right.
and blow the whole thing up, because we really need to build. The governor, as you said, she wants to have 30 some odd thousand houses, units built ASAP. We need to really build closer to like 50 or 60,000
Yes.
right now, and then about 15 to 20,000 every year thereafter.
Right.
And this isn't even getting us to zero.
No,
This isn't
it's
getting
not.
us to even. This is getting us still just behind less. So this is just one of those tools in the toolbox. Now, I think it's very disappointing that there was a media outlet who just printed, it seems to have printed a press release by 1,000 Friends of Oregon. They didn't write a story, they just printed a press release. 1,000 Friends of Oregon is an anti-development organization.
Right. They are.
And essentially, they said that you are taking away people's rights to vote, which is, when
No.
you see that, you could encourage folks to be inquisitive. If someone says they're taking your rights to vote away, they're probably not. And if you take a look at who wrote it, there's probably an activist reason.
Well, yeah, you got to realize the bias involved in that.
Well, directly. I mean, it's a press release by an activist organization.
Yes.
I would expect them to be biased.
Right.
I mean, if I was writing press releases for an activist organization, I'd be biased too.
Yeah.
That's my job. But so I guess I don't blame the organization as much as I express disappointment in the media organization who printed it as a news story. So that's a good, just a reminder to folks, hey, look at what you're reading. Even if it maybe seemed like a trusted organization, double check.
Yeah. And, we've had times, for every little piece of paper that is dropped off at your office in the Capitol, it has to tell you who prepared it,
right,
and where it came from, which organization, and that doesn't always happen. And so it's the same thing. Read the fine print at the bottom so you know who you're getting in league with.
Right. Well, Senator, I just want to talk about a few things to plan for what's coming up. We are just looking at the schedule.
Oh, it's a big one.
This coming week. It appears that they intend to have you out of that place on Friday. Friday evening, they look like they want to adjourn by Friday evening. In theory, they could go by the Constitution all the way to Sunday, but it does not look like they want to do that. I don't think any of us are sad about that. But
yes, they called for, sine die was imminent, and we had the 1 hour time restrictions. And so that was called at the beginning of the week.
Right.
And so you knew that everybody was getting ready to shut her down.
Yep.
Now that means that there are a lot of good bills that most likely will not pass. And there are a lot of bad bills that will also not pass. And it also means that a lot of those bills will come back in the future. There's one bill right now that has been worked on for 12 years, and they now think that they have it. So it's like Senator Girard says, tickety-boo. But I still don't think it's going to get to the floor to have that vote.
Well, hopefully some of those good bills that are going to survive are yours, because we still have some of your bills floating out there that we are working to get done across the finish line. There's also, we're starting to see funding decisions starting to come out. We'll talk a little bit about those. I'd like to do our next one of these. We'd like to do kind of a session roundup.
Let's do that.
Longer. But at that point, we'll be able to see what has been funded. One of the big things that you do that you are very proud of, I know, is how much money, tax dollars, that you bring back to your district. and we are just starting to see that come out. There's still more to talk
Yeah.
about, still votes that have to be taken, but I am thinking that our next one of these next week will be our last, until we go back to doing these on a monthly basis.
Yes.
But it'll be our last. We'll be able to kind of wrap up to see how your bills did, and how your funding requests did, and just talk a little bit about the future next time. How does that sound?
I think that's a great idea.
Excellent. Well, Senator, anything else that you want for the good of the order before we
Oh,
wrap it up?
no, I just wish if Mother Nature would get her act together and turn the snow off.
Well,
I know, it's kind of impossible, but I know you're basking in nice warm
I
weather.
am.
My son in Georgia is also basking
Yep.
in warm
Yep.
weather.
It is where I am at. It is currently 67 degrees.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, yeah, not sorry at all. Lord knows I put up with it for long enough.
Yeah.
All right, Senator. Well, enjoy your final week in the short session, and we will see you and everyone else again.
And once again, I sure appreciate your being able to do this. Thank you.
It's the highlight of my week, Senator.
Oh, yes.
It is.
Thank you.
All right.
And you know, your calming voice calmed Martin down too. So thank you.
That's good. My voice is finally coming back. It's been a go, I'll tell you that. All right. Well, thank you very much, Senator. We'll see you next week, and we'll see everyone next time.
Okay. Thank you.